speaking of the women who had come to the tomb, it says they left the tomb quickly with fear and great joy and ran to report it to his disciples. And behold, Jesus met them and greeted them, and they came up and took hold of his feet and worshipped him. And I just wonder what that encounter was like. Sometimes we have a very narrow definition of worship. We think worship is the songs that we sing before the sermon happens, right? And that's kind of the extent of our idea of worship. And I pulled on a song last week and couldn't bring it up, but Joy found it for me, and I want you to hear it. And I want you to just use it to expand your notion of what worship is about. Sometimes it's not words at all. Sometimes we're just in a place where we just worship with our hearts. And that can happen anywhere, anytime. Go ahead, brother. Father, teach us the truth of that song, that we would learn to be people who are comfortable in your presence and don't feel any obligation to fill that moment, those moments up with racket, but that we can just sit and be with you. Help us to recognize the distractions that abound and help us to turn away from them to find you waiting. Teach us to worship in the fullest sense of that word. Teach us way more than our beautiful building at 10:30 on Sunday morning. Way more than that. Make it so, Lord. I often worship at my dining room table with my Bible open. It's just worship. You know, on my own, I'm bent away from God. I don't go looking for it on my own. So anytime I sense an opportunity, like a longing or a drawing in that direction, I know that's not coming from me. And I'm learning to respond to those as invitations to come apart so that I don't come apart. That's not original. I stole that from somebody. Anytime you have that sense or awareness of an invitation, that's Him. That's Him. The Holy Spirit is within us as followers of Jesus, and He often will invite us just to have a moment. And sometimes we'll be in a situation where those moments can multiply and we have a session. You know? And it's just really deep and rich. That's worship. Where we just acknowledge Him for who He is and how much He matters to us. And I want you to get to a place where you're not feeling an obligation to fill that time up with words. He'll hear your heart. It's okay. We're going to go to John chapter 20, but before we get there, I'm going to share with you just a moment. Prompted out of watching a bit of news. I have to be careful of how much news I'm digesting these days. But it's very important that we don't disengage. Often I'll spend time in a psalm and I'll return to just a little section of one over and over again because of how encouraging I find a bit of it to be. In Psalm 9:9 is one of those when he says, "The Lord also will be a stronghold for the oppressed, a stronghold in times of trouble." For them, a stronghold had to do with the fact that there were occasions when nations, invaders would come in with ill intent. Meaning they're going to sack your city and kill anybody they get their hands on and take whatever they want to take. And so there were times in their history where they would literally have places they could flee, a stronghold where they knew they could ride out anything that was coming their way. The psalmist here says, Lord, you are my stronghold. Whenever I have oppression, whenever something is coming against me, I come to you and I know you'll be there and I can get through anything. And then he switches, watch the pronoun, listen how it switches. The Lord also will be a stronghold for the oppressed, a stronghold in times of trouble, and those who know you, those who know your name will put their trust in you. You hear how he switches it to a personal conversation? One minute he's talking about the Lord, the next minute he's talking to the Lord. Those who know you, know your name, will put their trust in you, and you, O Lord, have not forsaken those who seek you. And I just kind of camped there for a while and said, Lord, I want to be that guy. You know? I want to know your name. I want to put my trust in you. And I know you're not going to forsake me. Never have, never will. I assume that will be the case in this season of oppression, whatever it may be. And it appears that as a national entity, there may be on the horizon some oppression. We'll see. But then there was another verse on over in verse 17. The wicked will return to Sheol. Sheol was a mysterious place of the dead, the netherworld, a place of darkness. It was the place you did not want to be. The wicked will return to Sheol, even all the nations who forget God. You know, there was a time where God made covenants with nations. Israel had one. And as long as they observed the covenant, they could expect great blessing. And if they did not observe the covenant, the curses were all spelled out. This is what's going to happen if you don't obey me. And then Jesus came and he fulfilled all of that old covenant. And now covenants are made with individuals, with people, offered to each of us. The opportunity to have a relationship with God. Israel had a relationship with God as a nation. Now we are invited into a relationship with God individually and personally by placing our faith in Christ as our Savior. But I wondered if what we aren't seeing now is the effect of a nation that has forgotten God. We outgrew Him. We no longer saw any need to put our trust in Him as it appears we once did at our founding. Now we've outgrown a need for that. It's sort of like when one of our kids grows up and the roles begin to shift and they say, Dad, I got this. Don't worry about it. It's as if we as a nation have done that to God and said, we'll go on from here without you, God. That's kind of old-fashioned, a little restrictive. We don't want to live that way. It would be very easy for us as followers of Jesus to just want to withdraw and just ride out the storm. I want to suggest to you that that's exactly the opposite thing we ought to be doing. What that amounts to is putting our lamp under a bushel. He has called us to be salt and light, preservation, a preserving element and an illuminating element in the midst of all the brokenness. In the midst of a nation that has forgotten God, we are the reminder. Our lives ought to be so distinct and attractive that it would draw people to Him instead of repel them from Him. It's awful easy to watch the news and get angry and grouchy and just want to pronounce judgment. You know, remember what he called James and John? Son of thunder, Boanerges. Let's just call some fire down and burn them. Right? But Paul teaches us we don't overcome evil with evil. We overcome evil with good. Our weapons are spiritual. They are powerful. They're not material weapons. It's love. That we love people in spite of their brokenness because we know Without Jesus, we are just as broken. Just as broken. Still been that way. I already confessed to you. I'm rather resistant to correction. When I feel the pull against my bed, I say, wait a minute now, who do you think you are? Yeah. We must not abdicate our place as people of influence. Loving Jesus and loving people as who we are, no matter how jacked up it gets out there. Must be salt, must be light. That's free today. Now we'll get into the sermon. John chapter 20, we're talking about some appearances of Jesus after his resurrection. You know, last week was that first one where we gave a tip of the hat to the ladies who had been faithful throughout, had been there over and over again. They were the first witnesses. Mary Magdalene is named in John chapter 20 as the first one there. I can't tell you for sure. It gets a little tricky if you've been trying to follow along and connect with some of the different gospel writers on the chronological unfolding of this. Here it sounds like Mary came alone early, but then as you heard me read, there were several of those ladies that were there. Maybe it was Mary came first and she ran and told Peter and John. You knew John was a runner, right? He ran faster than Peter could, maybe because he was a youngster. You know, he may have just been a teenager. He outran Peter to the tomb, and he was just standing there, mouth agape, when Peter finally gets there, and he just blows past John right into the tomb, and there's that note, Jesus, and then off they go to tell the other guys, and then there's Mary Magdalene. Verse 11. Mary was standing outside the tomb, weeping. We laughed last week. What? There's no weeping on Resurrection Day. But there's Mary weeping. She doesn't have the benefit of 2,000 years of church history like we do. She's weeping. Was she sad? Was she excited? Was she confused? Was she apprehensive? Probably. Was she in some measure of great hope that Jesus actually still was alive? Likely, all of that mixed in. But there she's standing, weeping. So as she wept, she stooped and looked into the tomb, and she saw two angels in white, sitting one at the head and one at the feet where the body of Jesus had been lying. And they said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Come on, girl, what's this crying about?" And she said to them, "Because they have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him." And when she had said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there and did not know it was Jesus. Some sort of spiritual masking still taking place. Next week, we're going to look at the two disciples that encountered Jesus on the road to Emmaus. They didn't recognize him either. But watch what happens. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you seeking?" Supposing him to be the gardener. That makes me laugh. Who even knew they had gardeners back then? And why do you need a gardener in the cemetery? I mean, I guess we have some of those, right? We don't call them gardeners, and sometimes those guys are a little creepy, you know, hang out in the cemetery. No offense, you know, they make the place look great, but who knew they had gardeners? Mary thought maybe this guy is the gardener. I think that's the only time Jesus ever got mistaken for a gardener, you know. She thought he was the gardener, and so she says, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away." And Jesus said to her, "I wish I could tell you how it sounded when he pronounced her name. Mary!" Or maybe it was Mary. Or maybe it was Mary. You hear these little subtle shifts. Did I miss one? Any other one come to mind, a pronunciation? But it sounded just like Jesus. Because when he spoke her name, she turned and said to him in Hebrew, Rabboni, which means teacher. That's all it took. When he spoke her name, she knew it was him. There was no mistaking him. Have you had a personal encounter with Jesus? Oh, I don't mean audibly. Although I think he might choose to do that still. I don't know anybody personally that says they've heard Jesus speak audibly. You hear testimonies like that sometimes. I've never heard him speak audibly, and yet there have been times in my life when I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt he was speaking into my soul. And I was having that encounter, a moment between he and I. I think we ought to live expecting that sort of relationship with him. I think we ought to be building habits and rhythms into our lives that position us so that he has the opportunity to speak to us. I have a sneaking suspicion we live in a day of unprecedented distraction. How many channels do you have on your clicker? And sometimes we sit with our TV on doing this because that's not enough stimulation. We need some more. We can go anywhere in the world right there and learn about anything we want. We can hear about and you know what I think we do with all those distractions? I think it goes all the way back to the garden. We're hiding from God. Avoiding that moment when he would speak to us. Just us and him. And quite honestly, I think that just scares the bejeebers out of us. And so we hide. Just like Adam and Eve hid in the garden. Man, those face-to-face moments are powerful. I want to encourage you, though. The next thing you know, if my suspicion is right and the other women were still here, the next thing that happens is these ladies are just worshiping him. You don't have to script that, those encounters. It'll be okay. He'll meet you there. I want you to expect those encounters. They can happen anytime, anywhere. Whatever you're doing. I build practices into my daily life that let him know I'm all yours. You got anything you need to say to me? Anything you want to show me about what's going on? Anything new? Anything I need to be responsible for? And sometimes there is, and sometimes there isn't. Listen, it's only Moses got a burning bush as far as I know. Don't expect you're going to get a burning bush necessarily. Maybe, but I don't. But just position yourself on a regular basis just to be with him and to let him speak. He knows your name. He knows things about you that you haven't let anybody else know. He knows things about you and me that we don't even want to admit to ourselves. But he'll still meet you there. He'll still connect you. He still wants a relationship with you. And he knows the plans he has for you. Let me give you an illustration of that. You know, usually the rabbi just sat back all proper, and the students came and asked to be a part of his crew. You know, that's how it usually worked. Not Jesus. And the really heavyweight rabbis, they got the best and the brightest, you know. And not Jesus. Jesus didn't wait. He went and found people that he knew that were just right for what he had planned. You see, these guys that already had occupations, they had been rejected by the spiritual or religious elites and said, you don't really have it. Why don't you go be a fisherman? Now, we don't want nothing to do with you. You go be a tax collector. Those were the guys that Jesus found and said, hey, why don't you come follow me? And there was one occasion when some disciples of John the Baptist were cruising along, and you remember when John saw Jesus and said about Jesus, behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. Andrew was one of the guys who heard that pronouncement and was so impressed by what went on in that encounter, he ran back to his brother, whose name was Simon, and he said, we found the Messiah. And about that time, Jesus shows up with them. And the text says he looked at Simon. Now, it's not just a glance or just casual look in his direction. No, it's a word that wants to communicate. It's pulling out like he looked into him. He looked, metaphorically it's used, that looked at him with his mind. It's like, I know you, fisherman. I know you. By the way, it's the same word that's used after he has denied Jesus 3 times. And it says that Jesus looked across the courtyard at Simon, at Peter. It's the same word. It's like he looked at him with his mind. But back to the early call, when Jesus looked at him, he said, you are Simon. That was his Hebrew name, his given name. He'd have been proud of that one. But he said, you will be called Cephas. You will be called Cephas. That's Aramaic. That was kind of trade language. The name that we know him mostly by is Peter, which is the Greek name. And a good Jew would not have appreciated the Greek name. But he said, you'll be called Peter, the rock. He said, I know things about you, fella. I know where you're going. I got a spot for you on my crew. And sure enough, he did. He's got a spot for you among his followers. He's got a spot for you. Some of you are already aware of it. Some of you not at all. He's got a spot for you. You know what? Some of you are going to try to dismiss this concept and say, no, not me. You don't know where I come from. I got a past, man. Forget it. Jesus don't want nothing to do with me. Not so fast. Just a minute. You remember the heroine of our day today? Worshiping at the feet of Jesus, had that personal encounter, hearing him call her name, Mary from Magdala. We call her Mary Magdalene. I think it's Luke chapter 8. Yeah. Soon afterwards, he began going around from one city and village to another, proclaiming and preaching the kingdom of God. The 12 were with him. That's a significant little prepositional phrase. It's vitally important to our transformation. Build rhythms and patterns, habits into your life that make sure you are regularly with him. Transformational. The 12 were with him, and also some women who had been healed of evil spirits and sicknesses. Mary, who was called Magdalene, from whom 7 demons had gone out. And Joanna, the wife of Chuza, and Herod's steward, and Susanna, and many others who were contributing to their support out of their private means. Mary, who was called Magdalene, who didn't bail out of the cross, who was the first one at the tomb on the morning in spite of the threat of soldiers there guarding the tomb. She stuck it out all the way to the end. She's got a pretty wild past. She was the woman who had 7 demons cast out of her. I'm telling you what, I don't know exactly the implications of that, but for them to mention that, this old girl was a mess. We don't know when they came out, how they came out, who was responsible for it. Maybe if you've watched The Chosen, it was attributed to Jesus. I don't know that the text ever tells us that for sure, but we know that she's got a past, and now here she is, one of Jesus' faithful followers. That's good news. That's good news. He got room for you and his crew, even if you got a past. That's how he rolls, right? You come on in. We got grace. Yeah, you got a past, of course you do, but he says, he looks into you and says, oh, but there's much more to you than you have become. That's a quote from Lion King. Remember that one? You are more than you've become, said the little guy right before he whacked him on the head with a walnut. Us too. Listen, there's not a one of us in here that doesn't have untapped potential for following Jesus. We just got to decide it matters to us. That following him matters more to us than anything else, and we'll live our lives to demonstrate that reality. Doesn't matter where you've been. Doesn't matter what's back there. Didn't keep Mary out of the crew. And that old girl would have been a mess. Right? He knows your name. He knew Peter, knew Mary. He knows your name. Listen. Listen for him to speak it. Quiet moment. Let's play that song. We'll quit with this. Late in Luke, the 2 disciples meet Jesus on the Emmaus Road. That's where we'll go next week. For now, God bless you. It's been good to worship with you. Turn and share some love together. Meet somebody new, somebody around you, your name. You don't know it. So Dale Carnegie said that a person's name is the sweetest thing they hear. There was a couple, usually sits over here, early service, Mike and Jenny Sledge. I was going to confess to them this morning that I was preaching on the importance of knowing somebody's name, and it took me 15 minutes to remember theirs. But they weren't here, so I'm confessing it to you guys instead. I don't know, maybe it's pharmaceutical fault, or maybe it's just being 60. I don't know which it is, but either way. Work of the name matters, it's valuable. God bless you all. Love you. Let's have a great week. Let's go be the church.